There once was a man named Hack, who really liked kicking the sack. A kick to the ball caused him to fall, then I threw my hand down with a smack. Dang it! Hey guys, James here again, and today I want to talk about Hack or Die, an indie action platformer solo developed by Colby Crawford, who actually reached out to me to try out and talk about the game. Don't be fooled by the name though. This isn't a game about hacking, but rather here, you run through stages all while trying to keep a hacky sack up in the air. Can you get through the game and save your friend Kevin the dog? Let's dive into this. Kicking is fun. So like I mentioned in the introduction, a big catch in this game is that you platform through the different stages, all while playing with a hacky sack and trying your best to keep it in the air. I think this is actually a super unique concept and is one that actually makes the game quite difficult. This is because, in a way, it's like platforming with two characters at once, where both you and the ball need to make it past obstacles to the end of the level. Thankfully, you have a whole suite of different moves you can use to manipulate the hacky sack. Among those, you have an upward kick, a directional kick, charged kicks, a slide kick, a flip kick, as well as some aerial variations of those different kicks. Each of these kicks have their own physics and way of launching the hacky sack, and it gives a surprising amount of mechanical depth to what seems like a simple game. While the platforming itself isn't that hard, and I think there are some pretty forgiving hitboxes, I think properly timing and kicking the hacky sack can have some challenges. I think part of this is because small differences in positioning and timing will result in some different trajectories of the ball, so repeating outcomes, while very possible, can require some practice. Because of this, I think the game is really good for those more mechanically skilled players who like the challenge, and I can see a lot of potential in the game for speedrunning. My initial impressions were that I wish I had slightly more speed with the character, especially when sprinting, but that likely would throw off a lot of the timings. I also wish that I had a bit more control over my character, specifically with a fast fall. This was because some obstacles would bounce you up and it would be a bit annoying to have to wait for the descent. I actually read some patch notes recently though, and it seems like Colby added this, and hopefully that gives players more control over their character. I also had some minor issues with the slide kick where sometimes it wouldn't go in the direction I expected, but this wasn't an issue in most cases. Part action, part puzzle. Here I want to talk about the level design and how the game actually plays. The game consists of over 30 stages to play through, including some boss stages. Each stage has a number of different sections with their own little checkpoints. Each area will then drop a hacky sack on you and you need to make your way through the obstacles to the goal in order to advance to the next section. If you die or the hacky sack touches the ground, you then need to start the section all over again. The only note I had here was that I would have maybe liked the button to trigger the ball drop instead of a timed respawn, so you could give yourself a second to mentally prepare, but this is really minor and the pause button more or less does the same thing. I think the level design is solid and has a nice way of introducing new obstacles and progressing in difficulty. You'll have some parts where you need to move horizontally and others where you need to move vertically. Additionally, there will be some interesting platforms that maybe you can pass through and the ball can't, or vice versa. They also introduce some enemies here and there, each with their own behaviors in relation to you and the ball. There were some sections that I found way tougher than the other sections before or after, but I'm sure everyone's mileage might vary a bit. The levels also have some collectibles which you can try and use the hacky sack to touch, and some of these honestly had me pretty perplexed with how to reach them. To me, the level design felt very platforming focused and even had some puzzle aspects to them, forcing you to figure out what the best series of moves is to complete a stage. The levels felt like they consisted of some smaller, shorter rooms with obstacles placed in bursts, and this made for more focused challenges. For me personally, I felt like the game was at its best when you were fluidly flowing through the stages, jumping and kicking, and so I actually do think the level design might have benefited from spreading out obstacles a bit to allow players to get into more of a flow state. As it's designed now though, I think it's naturally more punishing, and in order to beat some sections, I did have to play very slowly and carefully, which unfortunately, I think did hurt my personal enjoyment. As a result, I think more mechanically skilled players or speedrunners might gravitate to the game and find a lot more enjoyment as they iterate and try to perfect their moves. To be honest, and as crazy as this might sound, I actually found this game harder than, say, Super Meat Boy, although I never did fully beat Super Meat Boy, and some sections took me more than an hour to finally execute, and the game even made me rage quit a few times. But that could also just be because I suck. Other than that, I did want to point out I wasn't a huge fan of the water sections, but hey, who really likes water levels anyway? I did actually enjoy the boss fights though, and I think some more challenges in a similar vein would be nice additions. Graphics and audio. I think one of the first things you'll notice about the game when booting up are the graphics and music. I think the game's whole presentation is super reminiscent and nostalgic of old Flash and browser games that you might have played as a kid. The graphics themselves, I don't think will blow anyone away. Everything's very blocky and maybe could use some more variation, but the simplicity still has its charms. The music on the other hand is actually pretty solid and I do gotta commend Colby on it. Again, it's reminiscent of old school games and I did enjoy it. The audio effects could maybe use a bit more variation and oomph for some of the actions, but I think for the most part, it was fine. About Colby. Finally, here I want to talk about the developer Colby, just to give them some props. I asked them about their history with game development, and they told me that Hack or Die was originally prototyped in 2010 or so, and improved over the years. In 2018, they started to dedicate as much time as possible to the game, and the project grew until the release we see today. Colby worked on almost everything from scratch, including the physics, soundtrack, and the assets, all while working full-time as a carpenter. Really, I just wanted to give praise to Colby for slowly developing a game, which is something even I wish I could do one day. And even though I might be tough on the game at times, I still do have an admiration for Colby and appreciate getting the opportunity to play the game. Is it worth it? Alright, but of course, the main question. Is Hack or Die worth it? Personally, I think the $13.99 price tag is fairly reasonable, although I would probably wait for it to be under $10 personally. But again, I think it's more of a treat for gamers who get enjoyment out of mastering games, particularly challenging platforming games like a Super Meat Boy or Celeste. If I had to give the game a score, I'd probably give it a 2.5 out of 4. I really do like the concept a lot and think it definitely has some satisfying moments, but I think this ultimately just wasn't a game for me personally, as it made me remember just how bad I am at games. Even so, I can see a lot of players loving Hack or Die, and ultimately, my reviews have never really been about the score, but rather showing players what a game is so they can decide whether or not it's worth it for them. But hey, that's just me. Let me know down below what you think. Have you tried Hack or Die, and what'd you think of it? And if you made it this far, I just want to say I appreciate you checking out the video. If you enjoyed it, please do consider hitting that like or subscribe button, as it helps my channel grow and motivates me to make more and better videos. And as usual, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Peace.